Alright, today we're going to be talking about sedimentary rocks. And the definition for sedimentary rocks is pretty straightforward. They're rocks made out of sediments. I wonder why we call them sedimentary rocks. They're made out of sediments. Well, what is sediment? That's a type of it, yeah. Well, what's that stuff? Mixture of what? Different rocks. There we go. All sediments are they're fragments of other rocks. We call those rocks the parent rocks. So the process to become a sedimentary rock is fairly straightforward. You need to have this big rock, and then weathering occurs. Three major types of weathering. What are they? Bigger than that. That's specific. Three major types of weathering for rocks. Oh, that's talking about weather, not weathering. Weathering is when the rock is being eroded away. So what are the three different ways that we can erode rock? Very good, and that would be a physical interaction. So you can have physical weathering. No. So you have physical weathering where you literally have two things coming together. When they hit each other, they break apart. Okay, that's physical weathering. What's another type of weathering? That would not be weather. That it would be melting. That's a totally different type of change for the rocks. How else are rocks changed? Yeah, it's all naturally. Okay, so you said water, right? Rain. So what does the rain actually do to the rock?
It says that water flow on the rock or slowly separated.
Yeah, so it basically kind of dissolves the rock, right? So that would be a chemical weathering. So that's really kind of the major two right there. So physical and chemical weathering. Physical is literally things being hit against each other. So running water is actually a type of physical weathering because the water molecules are slowly scraping against that rock, as well as the other sediments that are in the water act like the sandpaper. So after weathering, we get all these loose sediments. And those loose sediments are then eroded away from the parent rock and are then transported. And they're typically transported by wind, water, and glacier. I read an article the other day talking about transport. What they found is a recurring phenomenon where tremendous amounts of the Saharan desert is picked up by winds and then basically transported over the Atlantic Ocean and gets deposited in the ocean. You know, the stuff eventually falls out of the sky. In doing so, it actually disrupts some of the global climate. Because of the iron content of the sand, disrupts the ocean flow of energy. And so there was a little bit of transport. You know, you think about the Saharan desert, but that's actually a lot of dirt that's being dumped into the oceans every year. This actually has a tremendous weight on how climate changes. So that's something kind of interesting there. So after we transport, so this is basically the process before we become a rock. So we start off with a parent rock, it gets weathered, the pieces fall off the rock, they then are moved away, become transported, and then eventually they are deposited. And we'll get this process called lithification. Lithify, okay? Anytime we see that L-I-T-H, lith, what does that remind you of?
What?
No? Okay, think about what how does lithification look like something we talked about earlier? Think about the last unit. The lithosphere, what does that mean? Litho meaning what? And so anytime you see the L-I-T-H, it's usually going to mean rock. Okay? We talk about the lithosphere, and when we think about Neolithic period, time period, as the new rock period. It's basically the later part of cavemen learning to use stone tools. So it's the Neolithic period. So when I think about monolithic, these great stone structures. It's the monoliths of Stonehenge, that would be monolithic. So again, that lith, the L-I-T-H basically means rock. And so when we talk about lithification, it's a process from which we go from sediments and we get squeezed into a rock. So we already talked about this, right? Two types of weathering. There's chemical and physical. A chemical weathering is where there's an actual chemical reaction taking place. Physical weathering, you literally have it. You have two physical objects hitting each other, scraping against each other. That's forms of physical weathering. When we look at our sediments, as God, I learned to write faster. Two types of weathering: chemical, physical. Chemical reaction takes place. Physical, two things hitting each other. You guys really do need to kind of step up the speed at which you see films. You will not be able to keep up 4 years from now. Now, when these sediments basically fall apart, we call them plastics. And then we actually have these ranges, these different sizes, and they actually have specific names. And so when we think about plastic sediments, all they are is basically pieces of rock. All plastic is pieces of rock. It's very simple. They're fragments of an original rock. And then they actually get to be quite large. So this table is actually in your textbook. So I don't want you guys to do, I'm actually going to get out some textbooks here in just a minute. This table, and we have all these different sizes of sediments, and so we get really, really, really small sizes. So basically we start off with basic gravel. And all these things are basic size of gravel. And notice we get really, really small down here, so these are small, and then large. And so if you have a particle whose diameter is more than 256 millimeters, we technically call that a boulder. Then we get cobblestones. Then we finally have pebbles. And all three of these, when you start gluing them together with a little bit of silica, it all gets glued together, and it creates a rock called conglomerate. So actually, we'll take a look at these rocks here in just a minute. These are in your rock sets. The next one is sand. So if I compress sand, what kind of a stone do I get? This will be really hard to say. If I take sand and turn it into a stone, what kind of stone is it? Sandstone. Imagine that. Good job for Minecraft. Okay. Then we have silt. Then we have clay. Silt basically creates siltstone. Clay starts to make shale. So again, let's just make sure you guys understand we have different sizes of sediments, and then when those sediments actually make different rocks, that's how we get the different types of sedimentary rocks, completely based on that. So we look at erosion and transport. Erosion, like literally, is the actual process of taking away those pieces of the rock. And that's what erosion really is. It's taking away the pieces of the actual rock. And then normally, what happens after that is that it gets transported. So if you guys have ever seen images from the American Southwest, usually have this rock spire sticking up out of the ground, usually with a flat or slightly rounded top. And then around it is this little debris field. You guys have seen that before? And it's all of this that's your classic sediments. And all of that pile that surrounds that rock, that's actually used to be part of that rock, that spire sticking up out of the ground. That's how much has been eroded away over time. And then eventually the wind comes in, starts blowing at this, and what does it do to this pile? Starts to move it. That's the transport. So either those sediments get moved by the wind, or oftentimes by rain, and then you get rivers that move it. That's called transporting. And there are 4 main ways that we transport. You have wind, water, gravity, and glaciers.